The motors that power literally everything around us, your car, your kitchen blender, even the giant factories that make our stuff, they're all based on technology that's, get this, almost 300 years old. But what if I told you that's all about to change? A forgotten invention, a kind of ghost from the era of Benjamin Franklin, is making a comeback. And we're not just talking about an upgrade here. This is a complete reinvention of how we make things move.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the hidden flaws in the motors we use every single day. Then, we're going to jump in a time machine and meet Franklin's forbidden invention. After that, we'll see how a modern breakthrough finally solved a 300-year-old puzzle, leading to a totally new kind of motor. And then, the big picture. Why this is a global game changer and what the future of motion really looks like.
So, first things first. Let's talk about the motors that are, right now, running the world. Because it turns out, there's some pretty big problems hiding in plain sight.
I mean, just think about that for a second. What if the fundamental tech we rely on for almost everything is just outdated? It's a pretty wild thought, but when you look under the hood, you start to see some serious cracks in the foundation.
Okay, so here's the deal. These problems are all tangled together. For starters, most modern motors need rare earth magnets. They're super expensive and the supply chain is, well, it's fragile. Then there's the basic physics of it. You push a lot of electricity through copper coils and you get a ton of heat. That's called joule heating, and it's basically just wasted energy. To make things even worse, a lot of these motors spin way too fast for their jobs, so you have to attach an inefficient gearbox just to slow them down, which wastes even more energy.
And this number, this just says it all. In a typical industrial motor with a gearbox, a staggering 35% of the electricity you put in is completely wasted as heat. More than a third of the power is just gone. It's a huge inefficiency that's just been baked into our global infrastructure for decades.
So, you have to ask, if our current motors are so flawed, is there a better way? Well, the answer takes us way, way back in time, to an invention that was so far ahead of its time it was practically a ghost.
Picture this. It's the 1740s. Guys like Benjamin Franklin are totally obsessed with static electricity. They're using these things called Leyden jars, which were basically the first capacitors, to store up a huge electrical charge. Franklin even built this thing he called an electric wheel. He'd charge up some glass bars, and using the simple principle of attraction and repulsion, opposites attract, likes repel, he got the wheel to spin. He built an electrostatic motor. But then, the idea just vanished.
So why did it disappear? Well, it came down to one single fatal flaw, something called dielectric breakdown. See, to get any real power, these motors needed crazy high voltage. And at that voltage, the air between the parts would literally break down, creating sparks and short-circuiting everything. It was just too unreliable, too dangerous. So the idea was shelved, and the electromagnetic motor we know today took over.
And for almost 3 centuries, that's where the story ended. The electrostatic motor was just a weird footnote in history. Until now, a startup called C-Motive Technologies has found the breakthrough ingredient that finally solved this 300-year-old puzzle.
The secret sauce? It's a special dielectric fluid. Instead of having air between the moving parts, they fill the motor with this liquid. And just look at the difference it makes. This fluid can handle insane voltages. We're talking over 4,000 volts, without breaking down and creating sparks. It's an incredible insulator. And, as a bonus, it cools the motor down. It completely solves the original problem that stopped Franklin in his tracks.
And once you solve that one massive problem, suddenly the door swings wide open for a motor design that is totally fundamentally different from anything else out there. Let's take a look.
So get this, the inside of this motor has no rare earth magnets, no heavy electrical steel, and it uses up to 90% less copper. Instead, it's made of thin, flat plates, electrodes, that are literally just printed onto a circuit board. These plates are separated by a tiny gap, smaller than the width of a credit card. You apply a high voltage and the electrostatic force does the rest. It's unbelievably simple and elegant.
And when you put the two technologies side by side, it's just night and day. The old way needs expensive, hard-to-get materials. The new way uses common stuff like aluminum and plastic. Heat generation from wasted energy is practically zero. And here's a big one. It naturally produces a ton of torque at low speeds, so you can just ditch the inefficient gearbox altogether. The result is a massive, massive jump in efficiency.
And this chart really just hammers the point home. You go from a system that's maybe 65% efficient, best case, to one that's pushing 90%. That is a monumental leap. All that energy that was once wasted as heat is now being turned into useful work.
Now, it's really important to zoom out here because this is so much bigger than just a better motor. A technological shift this fundamental could have huge ripple effects on global supply chains, entire economies, and even our fight against climate change.
Let's start with geopolitics because right now, our motor supply chain is incredibly vulnerable. Something like 85% of all the rare earth metals in the world are produced in China. That means any little political or trade issue can put manufacturing for the entire planet at risk.
But electrostatic motors, they completely sidestep this problem because you build them out of common materials you can get anywhere. PCBs, aluminum, polymers, you can make them locally, anywhere. You can decentralize the entire supply chain, making it way more robust and secure for everyone.
And then there's the climate impact. Industrial motors use a massive slice of the world's electricity, so making them 20 to 25% more efficient isn't some small tweak, it's a game-changing reduction in energy demand. This directly helps with huge international efforts like the Paris Climate Accord, by slashing the carbon footprint of industry all over the globe.
So this all sounds amazing, right? But it begs the question, if this idea is 300 years old, why is it only happening now? And where does it go from here?
Well, it really all comes down to timing. Franklin's original idea hit two major roadblocks. There was no good way to insulate the high voltage, and there were no electronics to control it precisely. But now, thanks to decades of progress in the semiconductor industry, we have these incredible power electronics that can handle super high voltages with amazing efficiency. Basically, our modern tech has finally caught up with a 300-year-old vision.
And you should know, this is not just a theory in a lab. Major players in industrial automation, companies like Rockwell Automation, are already investing heavily. Real-world pilot projects are running as we speak, and the results look fantastic. We are right at the beginning of commercial adoption, but the shift has already begun. So that's the thought I want to leave you with. An idea from 3 centuries ago, once thrown out as a scientific curiosity, has been brought back to life by modern science. It's promising a future that's more efficient, more sustainable, and more secure. It really makes you wonder, what other brilliant, forgotten ideas are out there, just waiting for their moment to change the world?